All right, guys, campaign finance. So, as we've talked about before, the costs of a campaign are pretty substantial. You have to fund a campaign staff, you have to fund for the polls, political ads, which are becoming much more prevalent now. And if you look at this graph here, you can just see the amount of campaign spending that has changed since the 1960s. And it's just become a very expensive process. So, it's very important for these candidates, especially in a presidential race, to be able to raise money. So, with that comes the issues of corruption, because where that money comes from can be an issue. We want to make sure that our candidates are not going to be unfairly influenced by where that money is coming from. So, enter in the Federal Election Campaign Act, passed in 1971. The purpose, again, to kind of rein in some of this campaign finance and where it's coming from. So the first step of the Federal Election Campaign Act was to actually create a commission, a federal agency called the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, and its job is to police campaign finance laws. So it's there to make sure that these candidates are acting properly and the donations are coming in properly and there is no corruption. One of the policies here is they capped donations from individuals to candidates at $1,000. We call this hard money. So if you say, you know what, you really like Bernie Sanders and you want to give him $500 directly to his campaign, we would call that hard money. That is money going directly to the candidate. You can only, at this time, you could only give up to $1,000. We'll talk about it later, but they've since expanded that limit. Candidates must report where the money is coming from and how much the money is being given. So you can actually find this out. You can find out, like, where did Trump get their money from and how much of it did they get? The FEC has that reported to them. Those hard money donations. And it created something known as the Political Action Committee, or a PAC. You've probably heard this word thrown around, PACs. PACs are simply these fundraising organizations that are created with the sole purpose by interest groups to raise as much money as they can, what the limits will allow, and then use that money then to donate to candidates. Now, they're limited on how much they can give to. So, for instance, these PACs can only give up to $5,000 to one candidate. So you're not going to have a PAC raise, $20 million and give $20 million all to just one candidate as in the form of hard money. There's some loopholes here because that hard money is what the FECA limited. So they found other ways. Money will always find a way, but the hard money was capped. So they found other ways, and here's an example here of PAC spending in the millions, and you can see how since the 1970s that has just increased. With each election cycle, PACs are spending more and more money. And it's not just going to presidential races, right? It's also going to congressional races and such like that. All right, so what are those loopholes? The first one is soft money. So they've got hard money. That's that direct donation to a candidate. Soft money is when you give money to somebody else to spend it for that person. So in this case, what they would do is just give money to the political parties, and that wasn't capped. So you could give as much money as you wanted to the Democratic Party or to the Republican Party. Then the Republican Party could use that money to support that particular candidate. So just a nice little go around there for them. There were no caps on these soft money donations, only on the hard money. So the soft money is when it's that go around, you give it to somebody else to spend on them. The hard money is when you give it directly to them. So the hard money was limited, but the soft money was the loophole. So giving the money to political parties, those political parties then spent it on those candidates. And here you can see from this graph over here on the right how soft money donations greatly increased over time and kind of reached a peak there in 2000. Independent expenditures and issue advocacy is another one. So what they're doing here is, all right, so you have a PAC that's created by an interest group, right? And they support a Republican candidate. They could give money directly to the candidate, but they're limited at $5,000. That's the cap. Or they could do some soft money, but they can't be guaranteed about how that money is going to be spent. So another thing they could do is they can use an independent expenditure. That's the spending. So what they could do is they could fund a campaign ad. Right? The ad itself is what we'd call the issue advocacy. So the message that is there for that political ad can perhaps, like if this is done by the NRA, attack Hillary Clinton and her stance on guns. Let's watch that.
I did not email any classified material.
Really?
The FBI said that there were 110 classified emails that were exchanged.
Hillary lied. And another lie.
I respect the Second Amendment.
But behind closed doors, Hillary told liberal elites.
The Supreme Court is wrong on the Second Amendment.
Hillary will lie about anything to get elected. No more lies. Defeat Hillary.
If you notice here, it says the NRA. All right, so this is put out by the NRA. Just an example here of issue advocacy. They're not working with any Republican candidate directly here, so they can spend that money without it being regulated by the FEC. All right, so that's that go around. So the spending on it is the independent expenditure. The ad itself is the issue advocacy. As long as they're not working directly with the candidate, that's a nice little loophole for the FECA. All right, so soft money and these independent expenditures and issue ads. Okay, so we now know the loopholes. How do they close the loophole? That comes down to the BCRA, or the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, aka also known as the McCain-Feingold Act, right? Because it was created by these two senators from the different parties, hence it's called the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act. It banned soft money donations to a national political party. Now, you could still give soft money donations to a state political party, but those are now capped. That amount of money is now capped. It also raised the hard money limit from $1,000 to $2,000. So now if you really like Trump, or you really like Bernie, or whoever else is running, you can give up to $2,000 in hard money donations to them. But the soft money loophole was now closed. And it required campaigns to openly endorse their ads. All right, so if, for instance, here's an ad here put out by the Bush campaign in 2004, and it's an attack ad on Kerry. And now they have to claim that this is our ad. They can't just attack Kerry and make it seem like they weren't behind it. So any attack ad, any type of ad they put out, now according to this new law, they have to endorse.
I'm George W. Bush, and I approve this message. In which direction would John Kerry lead? Kerry voted for the Iraq War, opposed it, supported it, and now opposes it again. He bragged about voting for the $87 billion to support our troops before he voted against it. He voted for education reform and now opposes it. He claims he's against increasing Medicare premiums, but voted 5 times to do so. John Kerry, whichever way the wind blows.
All right, so you probably saw there, President Bush came out and said he supports that message. So that kind of falls in line there with the McCain-Feingold Act. Another loophole that comes up, though, are the 527 groups, which is an IRS designation. So these are groups that are not responsible to the FEC, but they're responsible to the IRS. They are non-political organization like a PAC that raises money for issue advocacy. They just can't be political themselves. All right, they can do issue ads though, as long as they're not, being overly political. All right, and again, they can raise unlimited money because they're a loophole. All right, last slide here for this video. We have Buckley v. Valeo. These are 2 court cases here. Buckley v. Valeo and Citizen United versus the FEC that are helpful to know. Buckley v. Valeo was in response to the FECA limitations. And what came out of this case is that the Supreme Court stated that limits on individual donations are constitutional, but limits on spending violate free expression. So originally, part of the FECA, there was actually limits on how much a candidate could actually spend on their campaign. And what this court case said was, no, you can't do that. How much candidate chooses to spend on their campaign is part of their First Amendment rights and cannot be violated. This leads us to Citizens United versus the FEC, which is in response to the BCRA. A lot of initials here, guys. And what it said was that corporations and labor unions are people. And because they are people, they have First Amendment rights. And so that meant that there can be no limitations on when ads can be aired, because that would be a violation of your free speech. When can you speak? So that something I didn't mention earlier, but the BCRA had limitations on when ads could be aired. For instance, like right before an election, you couldn't have any of these ads coming out from these groups, from these interest groups. And that was ruled to be a violation of their First Amendment rights. It also said that you couldn't prevent how much these interest groups spent and raised for campaign ads. And this leads to something known as super PACs. So super PACs come out of this decision. What a super PAC is, unlike a regular PAC, they cannot donate directly to campaigns. So they're not donating money to candidates, but they can spend unlimited amounts on campaign ads themselves. And if you look over here in this graph, you can see green is spending on campaign ads by the campaigns themselves, the Democratic candidates, Republican candidates, and the red is the amount of money spent by super PACs on campaign ads. So because of super PACs, they can raise unlimited amounts of money and they can spend unlimited amounts of money on campaign advertisements, as long as they're not working directly with a candidate. All right, so this is one of the reasons why you're getting so many more of these attack ads. Okay, guys, we'll stop there and bring any questions you have into class. We'll talk about it, and have a good night.